Welcome, everyone. I first just want to thank the organizers for inviting us here today, and I'm happy to tell you a little bit about my career and how I got to be where I am. My name's Tracy Smith. I am a nutrition scientist at the U.S. Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine. Can I just ask you all, are you PhD students, candidates? Are you postdocs? Are you masters? Raise your hand if you're master's level. Raise your hand if you're in a PhD program. Okay, it just helps me kind of guide the talk a little bit. So I started my undergrad career at the University of Connecticut in nutrition. And I was under my advisor at the time was Dr. Nancy Rodriguez, which I'm sure many of you have heard. And so I had the unique opportunity to actually do a research project as an undergrad, which doesn't always happen. I played tennis at UConn, and so I think my project was related to nutrition knowledge of athletes. Like, very simple project, really basic, but it was my first exposure to research that got me really excited. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to continue this through my career. So that was kind of the first exposure. After that, I don't know if any of you know, as somebody with a nutrition background, to become a registered dietitian, you either need 900 hours of clinical experience, or you can do a combined program, a coordinated program, and get your master's degree at the same time. That's the route I chose. So I went to Framingham State University for my master's, and also got the hours to sit for the RD exam. During that time, I was in my second year, and I happened to be in class with someone that was a research dietitian at USARIUM, and I didn't know it at the time. And she mentioned research, and she's like, I have this project, I really need help with it. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time, and said, I want to work for you. What do I need to do to get to USARIUM and help you out? And so that was back in 2001. And she took me on as a research assistant, and I was there for about a year part-time while I was finishing my master's degree. During that time, the best piece of advice that somebody gave me was get involved in whatever you can. Get involved in whatever you can, and do it with a smile on your face and be enthusiastic. So I did. I didn't say no to anything. And it was crazy. I got to do so much stuff. I started off at the bottom. I started off blacking out names on data collection documents. I must have gotten high on Sharpies. I think like 5,000 sheets of paper, I got blacked out names. But that was the start of it, and it led to, during that first year, I learned how to do all kinds of things related to nutrition. I learned how to analyze diets, create study diets, prep meals. But I also got to experience, there's a lot of exercise physiologists within the military nutrition division. So I also got to do a lot of exercise phys related things. I got to learn how to do max and submax testing, body comp testing. I got credentialed in those procedures at the Institute, got credentialed in phlebotomy, got some food science experience as well. So really just tried to make myself as marketable as possible. So when it came time for me to finish my master's, and I needed a full-time job because I couldn't just be a contractor forever, I got some offers to do clinical, and also got some offers. I almost went into physical education environment in the school system, but I went to USARIUM and I said, I'm going to be leaving. I need a full-time job, and they hired me. So I ended up with a government position as a research dietitian, which I don't know if any of you know, it's really difficult to get a government position. So it was something that I was really excited about, and I got that position in 2002. So during the next 4 years, I dabbled with the idea. I knew I wanted to go back for a PhD, but I wasn't sure how or where. And I also couldn't wrap my head around the idea of leaving this great job I had as a research assistant. So I was getting to write papers while I was at USARIUM, and it was just really hard for me to conceptualize leaving for that. So I found actually a PhD program that was part-time. I mean, I had the mentorship at USARIUM, I had the experience, I just really needed that, that degree and that educational opportunity. So I ended up going to Rutgers part-time for my PhD. It worked for me. I was able to do my research locally in the area, and it was a great opportunity for me because I got to keep my job. I did have to take quite a bit of time off to do my data collection for my dissertation as well as writing up the dissertation. But it just seemed silly for me to leave my job where I was, especially since they were going to hire me and give me a promotion once I did get my PhD. So that happened in 2010. I got a promotion as a nutrition scientist, and I've had my own research program for the past 6 years or so. So my research interests, I have 2 major program areas. The first one is nutrition interventions to mitigate decrements in immune function during times of stress. So basically, for my last project, I didn't let people sleep for 72 hours. They lived with us in the lab for 72 hours. They slept for 2 hours a night, that's it. And then we created experimental wounds on their forearm using a blister model. I know it sounds so gross, right? But it really doesn't hurt. So we created wounds, and we measure healing time, and we look at different nutrition interventions to see if we can speed up healing time during times of stress. The second area is I look at body mass index particularly when military personnel first enter the military, and look at how BMI affects them later on during their career for, say, the first 10 years. So that's another area. And I also help the ration developers look at their, test the physiology of new ration components and new ration ingredients. So that's what I've been spending my time doing. So I have some tips that I've learned over the past 10 years, and tips and tricks to get you into government or just other research positions. And some of them were alluded to in the last talk, but I'll tell you, I think you need to obtain research experience whatever way you can and become as well-rounded as you can. I think some people get into their program and they get tunnel vision and only focus on their thesis project or their dissertation and may not get exposure into other areas. I think it's really important to get your hands in as much as you can, even if you have to be pushy. So get your hands in everything and write up your results. So don't forget to write it up and publish it. You can, even if it doesn't get accepted to the first journal, shop it around, it'll find a home. So publish those papers and get them on your CV. While you're there at your university or wherever you are right now, expand your skill set too. Don't just get involved, but expand your skill set so that you can add those skills to your CV. That's really important. And you can cross-train in all different areas. So expand your skills in, for example, if you're an exercise physiologist, expand them in nutrition, expand them in sports psychology, get experience in other disciplines so that when you do apply, for example, when we have people apply to USARIUM for an internship or a fellowship position, we're looking for people that have gotten involved in other things. We're looking for people that have a varied set of skills so that when they come in, we can, use them in different areas, in different labs, because we share all of our research assistants pretty much at USARIUM in our division, in the military nutrition division. So I think that's important. Be a workhorse. So like I said, get involved in everything and do it with a smile on your face. Everyone can tell if you're there just walking through, going through the motions, or if you want to be there. So I think, not only get involved in everything, but do it enthusiastically. I always tell people you never know where your next job opportunity is going to come from. It's probably not going to, it could come from that internship that you spent 6 months doing. It could come from there, but it also could come from that postdoc that you worked with during your master's degree. That postdoc you worked with for 6 weeks. It could come from that person where they're somewhere where you want to be and you apply to them, and they say, I worked with that person during her master's and she did a great job. I want her on our team. So always get involved and show everyone that you want to be there. Seek mentorship from others. I think that's important. It doesn't have to be a formal mentorship. It could just be an informal relationship where you meet, once every couple weeks to talk about opportunities and talk about what you're learning and what they're doing. I think those type of relationships are important. And then those are all my tips. So how do you become involved in government research? There are 3 main avenues I think that you can do. So you can get hired straight out as a government researcher. I know at USARIUM, I haven't seen any positions come on board in a while, right, Angus? It's pretty few and far between. So that's not a common thing that happens. but it sometimes does. So keep an eye out on usajobs.com. That's one way. The second way is ORISE, coming in as either a contractor or an intern. ORISE is the Oak Ridge Institute of Science and Education. So occasionally when we need summer help or we need short-term or even year-long help, we can bring in ORISE fellows. And ORISE fellows are, it's a program for folks that are going through their education, so we can hire somebody as a student or we can hire them within 5 years of their graduation. So graduation from high school, bachelor's, master's, or PhD. And so with that program, it's a maximum of 1 year, but it's renewable up to 3, 4, or 5 years, depending on whether you come in with a bachelor's, master's, or a PhD. So that's another opportunity. You can check out opportunities for ORISE on the USARIUM website. Sometimes they'll post them there. And you can also check the ORISE website as well, ORISE. And that website has positions all over the country for government fellowships as well. And then the other way that you can come in is is you can actually join the military. So you can join the military as enlisted, and we have had some folks that have joined with a bachelor's or a master's degree as an enlisted soldier, and they've been able to write it into their orders to actually, after their training, they come to USARIUM, and they work within some of our labs. So we have a nutrition division, a performance division, a thermal mountain medicine division, and biomedical modeling division. So that's one, enlisted is another way. And then the last way is to, you can come in as a commissioned officer. So you come in as a captain, and you have to have a PhD to get commissioned as a captain, and you can come right to USARIUM. We have a current investigator, actually many investigators in our institute have gone that route and are now civilian investigators. Stefan Paseos is probably Dr. Paseos is probably the most recent person. He has lots of talks here in the protein. His area is protein for muscle recovery. And so he was a captain, how many years ago, I guess? 4?
You were in uniform for 4 years.
Yeah, you're in uniform for 4 years. And then he was transferred right over to a civilian scientist, got a job as a civilian scientist after that. So in terms of resumes, when you send your CVs, the only advice, a couple pieces of advice there, is tailor your CV to the position you're applying for. Don't send the same CV that you're sending for clinical to a research position. So really tailor your CV and tailor your cover letter to where you're applying. If you don't have much research experience, then parlay the skills that you do have and tell us how you're going to apply that to research. Whether it's leadership, some of the skills that you've gathered, really play up those skills so that we can clearly see with your CV how that can transfer to our institute. I know when I'm looking at resumes for dietitians and exercise physiologists and lab technicians for the division, I get like over 40 CVs because it's a good place to work and people know it. So I get like 40 CVs, and I'll tell you, the first thing that I do is look through is I discard the ones that aren't specific to research, where you know that somebody just, sent in a resume and didn't really pay attention to what kind of position they were submitting to. So really be specific. Follow up is the other thing. I would say follow up if you don't hear back within the first month, and then follow up like every 3 months. Sometimes we put out a call for CVs, and we get them, and then something happens and it gets delayed. And so if you follow up regularly, like every 3 months or so, then when we pick them back up again, or when we get the money comes in to be able to bring somebody on, it's that person that kept sending me emails every 3 months that I'm probably going to call in for an interview. So that's my advice there. And lastly, when you do follow up, be respectful and thoughtful in your written communications. Remember that your emails are a sample of your writing. And so I know in this day and age, we're all a little bit colloquial and very laid back, but in your writing and in your emails to people that might give you a job, be a little bit more formal than you think you need to be. I think that's important. So that's all I have. Any questions? Yeah.
So I know you said that you can go in civilian, enlisted or officer.
Yeah.
Is there a potential also for veterans?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ORISE program, we can take veterans within 5 years of completion of service. And you actually have a better chance of coming in as a veteran. One thing we look at with CVs is military experience is huge as well. Whether you were active duty or whether you've had some experience with the military services, that looks awesome. And it helps us because military is such a different animal from what people are used to. And so if you have experience in the military side of things, it helps us so much. It's like a whole area that we don't have to spend time teaching. So yeah, it's really important. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the best way to follow up after applying for ORI position? Because I know in most ORI applications online, they don't specifically have a researcher at the head that's looking for that job. So is there a way to get in contact with a specific lab or how would you apply?
I would contact, so if the lab is listed, you could contact HR for that lab. I know when we list it, it says the location, and so you can contact our HR and say that you applied and ask to be put in contact with the point of contact for that position, and our HR will send us your information. And so what they'll do is say, hey, I got this, correspondence, can you follow up? That's how. The other way is you can contact ORISE directly and, contact them and say, hey, I put in my CV. I'd really like to just get a little bit more information from that point of contact from the lab. Can I contact that person directly? And they'll usually give you the information. So, yeah. Yeah.
What would you say are the pros and cons of being
A contractor versus being in the military? Oh, that's a tough one. I've never been in the military, so it's hard for me to answer that. I think pros are, as military, you have a job. As a contractor's money is fluid. It's not hard money. And so you may only have a job for 1 year, whereas if you're in the military, you're pretty solid. You have a job for a while. So I think that's the pro of being military. I think one of the cons is that it's not necessarily a con, but you do have different responsibilities if you're military. You have your professional, your responsibilities in the lab, and what you want as a commissioned officer or as a PhD, you have what your program area, what you want to do for your research, but you also have your military obligations, and that's a really serious and important thing. You need to keep up with your training. You need to participate in the Institute's military activities. So sometimes people, commissioned officers, where we are, feel pulled in two different directions, but normally it goes quite nicely. And coming out as a commissioned officer, if you do a good job where you are and you decide you don't want to make it a career, those commissioned officers typically do get turned over to government employees after their time. So, and some decide to make it a career and end up going to different labs within the medical command. So it's a great opportunity. Yeah. Yeah. Constantly. Yeah, constantly. So we have, our division alone has just finished up a study. It was a collaborative study with the Military Performance Division. We just finished a bone health study with the Marine Corps. So, and we've done work with Marine Corps, with, all the services. Yeah. We haven't done much Air Force lately, though, have we? Well, Harris does some Air Force work, though. He did surveys, dietary supplement surveys. So, yeah, we do a lot of cross-collaboration. We're paid for by the Army, but we have a lot of collaborative work, a lot of researchers in other areas. So, any other questions? I'm kind of hogging the microphone. You guys want to go?
Jeez. I think you're scheduled next.
Good afternoon. I'm Sergeant First Class Barack Kluge. I'm one of the local healthcare recruiters here in Boston. Everybody here from the Boston area, or? Okay. Like I said, I'm a healthcare recruiter. I came into the Army, actually the Army Reserve in 1999. I know I don't look that old, but it's true. Started out in the reserves. About 6 years later, had an opportunity for a deployment to Iraq, so I took it. And then came back after a year of deployment service and went on full-time as a recruiter. I've been healthcare recruiting now for 5 years. To piggyback what was just spoken about, there are multiple avenues of ways you can get into the Army. There is the enlisted avenue, which is great, but with all your education, the commission is probably, it's gonna be a better service to you. We offer a dietetic internship with student loan repayment options. They're various, so I did not bring one slide on them. You could also come in as a health administrator, which is a 70 Bravo position, and get an assignment to Natick Labs. Like the speaker before me said, you can get assigned there in your contract. Is there any questions?
We've had a lot of dietitians that went through the program that came to this area.
Right. Go ahead.
No, we've had a bunch, yeah.
The dietetic student internship is a PT. It's through Baylor, Baylor University, and then you'll pay back some time to the Army or the Army Reserve, depending on what you get into your contract. And to go back to your question that you asked earlier, the difference between a contractor and a military position. The contractor position is only going to be temporary. It's usually for a year, or maybe a half a year. Your military contract is going to be 3 to 6 years, and generally you don't have to renegotiate that as an officer. You can continue to stay on, or you can resign your commission.
I do have a question because I'm actually looking at the data.
Sure. Okay.
I'm also interested in research and being research, so what are your recommendations and suggestions for someone who wants to go the research route but wants to go in the military? Because there is a PhD/RD program.
Uh-huh.
So would you recommend something that is affiliated route through the military versus going straight to the Army and doing a contract?
I would recommend going through the military. While you're, say you were in the Baylor internship program, volunteer for everything. Talk to network, talk to as many people as you can, because you never know who can give you that recommendation letter to get you over where you want to be. One in the back.
Yeah, can you tell me like the differences between if you go into medical, as far as like being a medical physician,
Sure. We do offer a health profession scholarship program for DOs and MDs. What that scholarship will pay is your tuition and fees, and you also get a monthly stipend for 10.5 months while you're in medical school. Currently, it's $2,239 and some change. It goes up every July, so it's about to go up here in about a month. And your payback time for the Army is year for year. So you take the scholarship for 4 years, you're going to owe active duty as a physician 4 years. Now that payback time starts after residency. Once you graduate medical school, you're going to get promoted to the rank of captain. And you'll be paid as an Army captain while you're in medical school. Which the highlight of that, aside from being an Army captain, is Army captains make generally about $90,000 per year, as opposed to the civilian counterpart. A resident makes anywhere from $45,000 to $50,000 a year. So the difference is substantial.
Can you speak more to the commissioned officer track? When do you begin that? Earlier in your career or after your
As for nutrition?
Or, I'm not a nutritionist.
Okay.
I'm more interested in this water, so I'm
You would start that after you get your PhD. Yep. You had another question?
yeah, so with the medical position.
Sure.
Is the pay difference the same after residency? And how much freedom do you have as far as like where you position?
You're going to get paid off your rank and your time in service. So, for example, an Army captain who's a physician is going to get paid the same as an Army captain who's a finance officer, based, if they have the same amount of time in service. As far as your location, when you're going through the application process, you get to make what we call a wish list. You'll pick upwards of 10 locations that you want to go to, and the Army will do their very best to accommodate where you want to go. So what they're going to do is, after you finish your training, they're going to look at your specialty and your rank, and they're going to look for vacancies. So they'll take your number one selection. If there's a vacancy for you, then congratulations, you've got your number one pick. And now, some people try to play guessing games, and they'll put their number one and put it in their like number 5 or 6 range because they are a conspiracy theorist and think that they're not going to get what they want. I would highly recommend not doing that, because if you pick the one you don't want to go to as your number one, then chances are that's where you're going to go.
Could you possibly speak to some of the advantages that you see being on active duty? There's probably some people in here who have not experienced that before. And how would you contrast that as active duty to a non-active regular civilian life?
Active duty, it is a full-time job, and it's guaranteed. Especially with Army medicine. Army medicine has come a long way. The Army Medical Department is doing research on things that the civilian sector hasn't even decided to touch yet. As of 4 years ago, the Army Medical Department had actively been looking for a cure for HIV and AIDS, and they'd made advances in it. And civilian private companies weren't even scratching the surface. But active duty life, it isn't really any different than that of a civilian. As a medical professional, you're going to work in shifts. You might work nights and weekends. You might work Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. We do have a great benefits program, such as free health care, dental, vision, and that would also cover your families. And in the civilian sector, as you guys are well aware, that's quite costly. Yes, we do have a PT Baylor program also. It is a high attrition rate because it's much more fast-paced. Students graduate roughly a year to 2 years earlier than if they were go to a civilian university. Once you complete your training, you are assigned as an Army physical therapist on an active duty location anywhere in the continental United States or overseas. Go ahead. Yes, they can. While you're in your training, towards the end of it, that's when you would start applying and asking to go to the follow-on training for different specialties. And that goes back to the networking piece that I spoke on earlier. Just you volunteer for everything. The more you do, the better you look. Any further questions? All right, we'll turn it over to Angus.
Good afternoon. I work with Tracy Smith out at Usarium in Natick, and when I was approached to come and speak to you, the intent for me was to fit in and help foreign students who might be coming here. Are there foreign students here who are looking to maybe stay longer term in the US? We have one. All right, so I had planned a talk on how I went from a student F1 visa to the J visa to the H1B visa to the green card to the permanent residency before I could get a job with the government. So young man, if you want to speak with me afterwards, then I'll direct my talk to a second part of my, you cool with that? Are you okay with that if we catch up later? Because it's kind of weird for me to be a South African and I'm with the United States government, I'm in the Department of Defense and I have secret clearance. How the hell does that happen? So that was my introduction, that was my title for my talk. And we can have a talk afterwards, I'll stick around. But I thought what I could add to Tracy's work is what I do. And why I think I have a cool job and I'm really lucky that they pay me for what I do. So it turns out soldiers get a lot of diarrhea. We fight in foreign countries, we drink bad water, and traveler's diarrhea is the #1 problem in soldiers. So how can I bring my skills from diabetes research? What can I do in military nutrition in the US Army? So we designed a mouse model, we published that, we showed that giving zinc supplements worked in a mouse model. I found out that in Western Kenya, the US Army has been there for 36 years doing malaria vaccines. It's the diarrhea capital of the world. We have labs in different parts of the world. And I got to spend 3 years back and forth running a human study with 500 adults, giving them zinc supplements or placebos for 4 months at a time to see if we could reduce the diarrhea. Why Western Kenya is because we have a foothold. They do malaria vaccines, and they get the same diarrhea that our soldiers get in southern Iraq. So I go to work like this. I work in jeans and a shirt. I work with animal models, and then try to relate that to the soldier. The key piece here is I'm not in the business of fixing busted animals. My customer is a busted soldier. So if diarrhea is number one project, that's where the funding is. So I write my grants and I write my applications to get funded. My salary is hard money, but my research has to come from grants, right? So we ran these studies in Kenya, and I was actually in Nairobi airport when I spoke to my boss on the phone, and he said, "You're doing great work. We love what you're doing, but we have a different problem. Have you heard of TBI? Traumatic brain injury." So I'm coming from diabetes background, working at the other end as a PUC doctor, and now, so you heard in the earlier talk about wearing multiple hats. And what Tracy alluded to is going where the needs are. So the Army assumes you got a PhD, a terminal degree, you can do anything. So I know nothing supertentorial. I'm at a loss for doing brain damage in soldiers, enough to know that there's 330,000 soldiers with mild to moderate TBI from the current 2 escapades in the desert, and we have no treatment for these soldiers. So I work in nutrition models, and I hit my animals on the head, and I see what they can do in recovery by moderating the diet. Let me add to this what makes it interesting. During times of war, the Israelis come and visit us, and the Brits and the Australians come, our allies, and they pick our brains to learn from what we're doing in facial transplants. We are world leaders in full facial transplants from burns. The Army's doing some amazing stuff down in San Antonio. What's missing is that we're not sending our scientists overseas to pick their brains. So we have a program called the Eset, Engineering Scientist Exchange Program. I'm from South Africa. I speak English and Afrikaans. There was an opportunity in the Netherlands. So they shipped me, my wife, my 3 kids. We got to spend 18 months in the Netherlands blowing up shit, doing blast, causing brain damage in a perfect IED model. So I have rats with brain damage, and on low zinc they don't recover. So that was awesome to get that experience, that international experience through the military, wearing jeans and a regular polo shirt. I don't wear a uniform. I'm back now in Natick, and I'm developing my models here, trying to get things that we can translate to the soldier. There's an in-between piece. So we're approaching universities where women soccer players have brain damage from hitting their heads, from hitting the ball. Is that an appropriate model? Because they're soldier-relevant population. So I curtail my science to make it benefit the soldier who's helping me sleep safe at night. I give you an idea of what I do every day in my work. So it's changed over time, it's evolved, it's become better, and it's become more focused. And I'm fortunate to do the work. We're seeing benefits, but it's also where the money's coming from headquarters. All right? Did I miss anything?
I would just say funding.
It's funding?
No, I was just thinking funding, because you talked about
Funding.
writing grants. We don't necessarily have to write grants as government employees to get money to do our research. That's actually the nice difference between government and academia. So we have we're funded by our headquarters, and it just has to fit into what the military needs are. We can write grants for external money and get grants through NIH or any other avenue that way. But our funding mostly is centrally funded,
Correct.
which is amazing. So I have a lot of administrative, probably the time that you would spend writing grants in academia, we spend it on doing government training, because I feel like we do training every 5 minutes. But we don't spend hours and hours writing grants. We spend our time researching and writing new protocols and writing up the data and getting stuff published. So that's, I think, the big difference with academia.
So I've spoken to you about, Tracy and I have spoken to you about awesome things, what we like about our jobs. So something to consider. We don't have much opportunity for teaching, classroom teaching. So that's going to be missing from your resume 10 years down the road. If you're saying, after wearing a captain's uniform, doing hard, great science, publishing, very little of our stuff is close to secret. We publish in all the good journals, and we try to do in the better journals. But what will be missing from your resume in 10 years is you didn't teach a classroom. Plus, the grant writing. You coming into Michigan State University and you're saying, well, I got a $12,000 grant from the Air Force. They want to know, do you have hard teaching? Can you teach undergraduates? Can you bring in funding to the university? So, am I limited? I don't think so. Instead, my focus, all my time is on my research program. So I need to excel at that, and as Tracy was saying, get hungry, be aggressive, and get the publications out. So we have a clearance process. And it's not about, you're doing stuff that's top secret and we need to hide it. It's more about the Army wants to, you say CYA, right? Cover your ass. The Army wants to make sure you're not putting the Army in a bad light. So all my stuff, I've had 1 or 2 edits saying, that's not a cool thing to say about the Army. Can you change it a little bit? So we are literally free to publish all the stuff we do. All right? Are there any, that's it for me. Are there any questions? Sir?
Could you kind of explain what your lab looks like? Do you have just researchers underneath you? Do you have a lot of interns? And how would that lab structure in the military differ from what it would at your standard university?
Okay.
You want to talk about your lab and I can talk about mine?
All right. Captain Catrone is a PhD DVM, and he came on board in December, and he does animal models of PTSD. Sergeant Loban is from Minsk in Belarus. I sat with him in Faneuil Hall when he became a US citizen, and he has a master's degree in medical technology. He operates my running wheels, does all my software and my programming and my data analysis. Jack is fresh graduate out of University of Georgia and just got accepted to medical school. Michelle works part-time. She has a master's degree in, she's a med tech, and she's an RD as well. And I'm piecing together. And then we have 3 animal technicians who are full-time in uniform taking care of my animal colonies. Different from maybe your lab, I don't pay for space for my animals. Most universities will charge you by the cage, so they'll put 6 or 7 animals in a cage. Mine are living individually, and I can do running wheels on each rat individually. That's a little bit too much detail. But does that give you an idea of what I have for staff? And I don't pay any salaries. They come from the overhead. It's not from my individual grants. Tracy, what do you got?
Yeah, so I think what's different about USARIUM, or really all of the divisions operate a little differently. So some of our other divisions seem to operate sort of like you do, Angus, with your, Angus has 3 people that are pretty much dedicated to you, right? So Sergeant Loban does some other work and helps out where he can, but he pretty much has 3 people dedicated. In my lab and in the couple of other labs, we really don't, I have 1 research technician, master's level, Marcus. He's an exercise physiologist, and he's kind of been my go-to person. We brought him on as an ORISE 3 years ago, and he's kind of been my go-to person. However, he works just as much with other investigators as well. So our division is very collaborative, and we're very fluid. So if someone has heavy data collection going on, then more of the team shifts over to whoever has heavy data collection going on. So all of the investigators within our division probably have like 1 go-to person perhaps, but then in terms of like for me, my other technicians, it just is who's available. We've got 3 research dietitians in our division that float, and it just depends on who has what going on, and they will come help out for different projects. So I have 1 in particular that's working for me on 1 project, and then another research dietitian that's helping me out on another project. I think that that's a really interesting way, very different from academia, because I think, right, in academia you have like your lab, and pretty much you have a set, you have your advisor and the set people that are in your lab, and that's kind of your family for the next, while you're spending your time there. But like I said, in where we are in our division, we share, everyone kind of works together. Even as investigators, I'm a co-investigator on 6 other protocols that are in various stages of development right now. And I have 3 associate investigators on my protocols On my 4 protocols that I'm a PI on, I've got like 3 or 4 different investigators within our division that are associate investigators. So we collaborate together. We try to get the most bang for our buck. I'm looking at sleep restriction and the effect on wound healing, and we have somebody else in our division that's really interested in the microbiome. So he's taking poop from my volunteers so he can look at the effect on the microbiome, sleep restriction effect on the microbiome. So there's all kinds of cross-collaboration as well. So that's what my lab looks like. Yeah?
On average, how many studies or projects do you all have going on at once?
That's kind of a loaded question. Only because we're the busiest. I think in the past couple of months, I've been there 12 years, we're the busiest that we've been. We counted over a dozen protocols, active protocols and active data collection going on in the same month. There was 1 week we had 5, we call them TDY, temporary duty, so field studies that weren't happening at USARIUM, they were happening all over the country. We had 5 studies going on at the same time over the same 2-week period. And we're a small division, and so in order, we borrowed people from other divisions in order to make it happen. Some of these field studies, you don't get to tell people, you don't get to tell the Marines when you want to do your study. You say, please help us, this is what we want to do, and you work together and they say, here's your week. This is when you can collect data, and you better darn well get down there and collect the data during that week, because otherwise you're going to lose your opportunity. So we did the best we could and mobilized our team to be able to go everywhere. We have investigators. On one study, I was the ombudsman, meaning that I was there just to listen to the briefing to make sure that our investigator was following proper procedures and telling the research volunteers all the risks and benefits of the study and such. So as investigators, we go and collect data as research assistants for other investigators when they need help. So we do whatever it takes. I would say in a normal year cycle, we have at least a half a dozen active studies going on at our low point. At our low point, I would say half a dozen studies going on actively. So we're a very busy division. And so we have somebody here that used to work for TMMD, but I would beg to argue that MND is probably the busiest division at USARIUM. Would you agree with that, Brandon? You don't know. So no, all of our investigators do really good work at USARIUM. But everyone's just kind of does it a little bit differently. Our projects, we sometimes have really short-term projects where we're able to get them done within a month, versus sometimes we have long-term projects that take years. And some of them, our other divisions have they need to recruit over 100 people. So it takes them a long time just to get one project done. So it just depends on what the individual projects are and how productive a division is based on that. So, yeah.
With all the projects going on, how does it compare how research is where you're at and other universities? How do you compare? Do you have a review board as well?
We do. We have a review board. So we have 2 review boards. So we have IACUC for animals, and we have the IRB for human use. Our IRB, we collaborate a lot with different universities, and I can tell you that our IRB is a lot stricter than academia, at least the dozen universities that I've worked with, and we're just stricter in different ways, which is interesting. So there might be something that our IRB doesn't even bring up that a university might bring an issue up with that we have to address. But I would say on the whole, because we're following federal, we're under the federal government, our IRB it takes a long time to get through IRB, to the point where we have so we have our local IRB, and then if a project is if it's not funded locally, then we have an upper IRB. So we have HARPO, which is our MRMC, which is the Medical Research and Materiel Command. That's our mothership that our lab falls under. We have to go through our IRB and get approval, and then we have to go up to HARPO as well. So it's almost a 2-tier, depending on where the money's coming from.
We excel at bureaucracy.
We excel at yes. It's a gift. It really is. So I think half of my job is spent doing IRB paperwork. I really do. And IACUC was an issue. I don't know if we need to get into issues, but you've had issues with IACUC just because.
I'm the chair of the IOCA
Yeah.
Animal Care Committee. So my goal the next 2 years is to expedite as best I can, because the paperwork, wow, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a question in the back? In the blue, yeah.
And I apologize in advance, I've been a little late to the answer this. How often do you guys collaborate or talk with the other military branches in regards to the research that you're doing? So like the Air Force, the Navy, et cetera.
So, you collaborate?
Yeah, we collaborate all the time. Yeah, so we just talked about, we have a study, a collaborative study between our division and the Military Performance Division with the Marines. We just finished with the Marines. So, and then we have another investigator in our division that does, he actually runs the dietary supplement program for the entire military. He gets money from the big military to do dietary supplement research. So he conducts surveys with the Air Force, Navy, yeah. Yeah, all the time. You have a lot of academic collaborators. Yeah.
I've worked with 9 different universities.
Yeah.
And in terms of collaborating with Air Force and Navy and stuff, I've had Air Force funding as well. We have an investigator who's working with the Norwegian Defense Force, doing high-protein studies during a 5-day cross-country ski trek in the middle of January every year. We do significant work with the IDF, Israeli Defense Force. So we can do it with universities in country, which we call CONUS, and then we can do OCONUS as well. Now, I would urge you, we can wrap this up, we can urge you to look at usajobs.gov, one word, usajobs.gov, and if you type in the word physiology or physiologist, that's our category, right? And you'll see 34 jobs this week. Some of them are physicians, or some of them might be nutrition people, but straight physiologists, interdisciplinary physiologists, Air Force, Navy, Army, that's where they post their positions.
Thanks for that, all the advice. I got a question, kind of going the other way, y'all alluded to opportunities after you graduate, but in a different direction. I'm actually an ORI participant.
Oh, awesome.
With the U.S. Army Research Laboratory with a Master's of Technician.
USERL, right? Okay.
So going the other way, what are the opportunities that I can take to get the military to pay for the PhD? The next step. I know I've heard of the long-term training, but from what I've been hearing, that's going to be going down. The SMART scholarship is what I've been hearing. Do y'all know of any other
I
ones?
should have mentioned that, yeah. Yeah, so we have, there's a couple, so with me and so you're ORIs right now? So you can talk to USERL about taking some classes, as a non-matriculated student. You could do that and see if they'll pay for classes through ORIs, because ORIs is an educational fellowship. So I know we've had people that have been ORIsers that have taken master's classes while they've been ORIs with us. So that's one way to do it. A little bit harder to do it with to do it for a PhD. We have somebody that works in our division that was a SMART scholar. So what he's talking about, the SMART program it's a program where you can apply, you can be a government employee, but you don't need to be to apply to the SMART program. And you apply, and they actually pay for your education, and they pay for they give you a stipend, like a really good stipend. I think it's like $50 or $55 a year salary. And then you owe the government time after, like you match it. I think it's like 3 years after or something. But you can write it into your SMART contract where you want to go after. So for Dr. Carl, he was a research dietitian at USAREUM. He applied to the SMART program. He went to Tufts for his PhD, and he came back. He's back at USAREUM as an investigator now. We have another, she's not with us anymore. She decided to go into academia, but she did the SMART program through a different lab. She applied to a different lab and did her PhD at Clemson, and then realized that the lab that she applied to, that she was supposed to go back to, really didn't fit what she ended up doing for her dissertation work. And so she came to USAREUM and did her academic time at USAREUM. And then the long-term training is the other option. But so you've heard SMART is going to go away? I hadn't heard.
No, just the long-term training is very nice.
They're going to cut that down, yeah. When I did my work, I was really lucky when I did but I was a federal government employee already. The federal government was able to pay for my classes that directly benefited my job. So about a quarter of my dissertation, a quarter of my degree they paid for. So they couldn't pay for the dissertation, they couldn't pay for any independent studies. They couldn't pay, there was a few things they couldn't pay for. But it ended up to be, all told, they paid for about a quarter of it, which is not bad at all. So every little bit helps. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah?
These last few minutes, how is work-life balance, that oxymoron?
Yeah, it's such an oxymoron. Whoever says you can have it all, doesn't have, no. I find that it ebbs and flows for me personally. So I have 2 children, and I had them, I don't know what made me go for my dissertation when I was like having my kid number 1. But I made it through, and my son is 7 and my daughter's 3. And I think that it was a little tricky, but where I work is very, very supportive. And so I was able to take maternity leave and such. And even now, as an investigator, you have goals that you have to meet. And so it's really flexible, which is fantastic. So, but I do have goals and I do have things I have to do. So if that means that I have to go online at night to get some of my work done, then that's what I do. Am I working 24/7? No, definitely not. But I do work from home for a half day on Fridays. And you know what? If I don't get my stuff done Friday that I need to get done for Monday, I'm going to be working Friday night at 10 o'clock, or I'm going to be working Saturday or Sunday to get my stuff done. And so it's just the nature of the beast. If you want the flexibility, you've got it, but you also have to respect the flexibility. And you also have to, get the job done. So I think the work-life balance has been good. But you have to work at it. It's not just magical, You have to figure out what works for you. You have to figure out what works for your family, and you have to surround yourself with people that are supportive. And I think that's a huge thing. I have a really supportive team around me, and I have people that help me so that on Tuesdays and Thursdays I can drop my son off at school and not get into work till 9. But I also stay late until 6 o'clock. So you kind of make ends meet whatever way you can. So. All right. Thanks so much, everyone.